Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday morning. Everybody watching on YouTube or here on the Patreon feed. Hope you're doing well. Getting ready to record, holy cow, episode number 39 of Mike in the Midwest. Going to take it a little bit different direction today. Going to have some fun. Talk about some things from my childhood here in St. Louis. I bet it's similar, maybe a little different, but similar to where you grew up. So let's do this because I got to get back to work here shortly. I'll get caught up before lunch. I don't know if that's going to happen today. We got a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to add a couple things to Mike in the Midwest this week too. So let's see how this goes. Hope you're doing well wherever you're tuned in. Hope you're having a great day. It is cold and rainy here in St. Louis. It's actually going to snow a little bit out to the west of us. That's crazy. It was 75 last week. What? It's going to be 65 this weekend though. So by Sunday. See, you just got to hang in there, as my grandpa said. Hang in there. Things will be good. Just hang in there. Alrighty, here we go. Welcome to episode number 39 of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the amazing patrons of the Be Our Guest podcast. Happy Thursday if you're checking this out on release date. We're recording the show on Thursday, March 18th, 2021. And I hope you're having a very lucky day after St. Patrick's Day. I sure appreciate you being a patron of the show, supporting the Be Our Guest podcast so we can continue to bring 4 shows a week to the masses. I hope you always enjoy those shows. More importantly, I hope we share a lot of laughs. The Be Our Guest podcast is always going to be there to give good information, something to think about, maybe a different restaurant to check out, maybe an alternate strategy to get around Epcot where you're not waiting in line as long, or, maybe there's some kind of a, little tip, go counterclockwise through World Showcase, something like that we could bring to you that might be something that improves your next trip. But more importantly, this is just my opinion. I hope that we always kind of share a sense of community, and that maybe while you're walking the dog or doing the dishes or, driving into work or maybe home from work on a Thursday afternoon, we can chuckle together. It's something Ricky or Pam said, some kind of a story that you can relate to. Like, oh man, my kid did what Mallory did when she was 4 years old, and it was the craziest thing ever. Mike isn't the only one. I hope that's what this show is always about. As I've said in the past on the Be Our Guest podcast, the main show is that more than anything, I'm a fan of podcasts. As if you follow me on social media, I get up every morning at about 5 o'clock in the morning and I run for about a couple hours. And that is kind of my me time where I get to focus and think, whether I'm inside on the treadmill or outside running around our little pond that we have in our subdivision. It's a small little 1/4-mile loop. So I run it many, many times. So I got to take my mind off that small little path. And, I listen to podcasts, and they're not all Disney podcasts. Some are, some aren't. But the thing I know about my podcast is that with the hosts and with the folks who put on those podcasts, I feel like, in that 45 minutes that I'm listening to their show that week, or some of the podcasts I listen to, could go on for more than 2 hours. I know their likes, and I know their dislikes, and I know the things that make them tick. And, I've been around long enough, listened to enough shows that I know they're kind of inside jokes. I hope that, over the past 13 years, we've kind of developed that same kind of relationship with the Be Our Guest podcast with you, and that you've really feel like you're part of a family. I know that many of the podcasts I listen to, I've never met the folks. I've never met them. A lot of them are not even here close to where I live. Some in California, some in New York, Texas, all over the place, Canada. I've never met these folks, but I feel like I know them. I feel like that if we met, we could sit down and share a Coke Zero and swap some stories. And I hope that is always how it is with our show. And on top of that, I think we have a unique opportunity in that we're all Disney fans and we all like to go to Disney destinations. So someday I hope that we absolutely can, sit down at Pecos Bill's and share some fajitas and some stories, or grab a cinnamon roll at Gaston's Tavern. How good does that sound right now? That sounds great. or, even better, sometime when we get that next podcast cruise out there, which may be sooner rather than later, we can, spend a week at sea, having all kinds of adventures, running around foreign ports, dancing in an evolution on the ship, or, the tube, or, just having a nice dinner in Palo together. Those are the kind of things that I think we're very blessed, because we've gotten to do these things with our listeners over the past 13 years. And the thing is, it's not a podcast or listener relationship. This is a bunch of friends at this point. I hope you understand that. I hope that becomes what we get to develop at some point at the Disney parks, whether running a race, sharing a snack, riding a ride, giving a high five to one of the kids that tunes in. I love that kids listen to our show. We always try to keep that in mind. But I just appreciate you guys being here. So as we start episode number 39, now last week we talked about high school stories, right? I kind of gave the background. I told you about my crew back in the day of Corey, Fred, and Ray, and Mike. That was the four, that they were like the four amigos. So I talked about that. I talked about Hazelwood Central, the size of the school, where it was located, and so forth. Now, next week, I'm going to give you 1 week off from the high school stuff, because I'm going to get into more adventures, stuff that I used to do with Corey, Fred, and Ray in high school. I don't know if I want to admit it on tape, but we'll do it next week. I'll give it another week to simmer, but we have a lot of good stories there. But I want to give some feedback. I got a couple of pieces of feedback, which I thought were interesting, because today I'm going to jump into something different. Than next week, more high school stories for you. Because I think I listened to another podcast where they swapped high school stories for about an hour, and I cracked up because we did a lot of the similar things, but this person was in Oklahoma. So similar situation. He went to a suburban, big public high school in Oklahoma, but more rural than we had. Like, we didn't do anything on tractors, even though my friend Corey, he was from the country. He'd have been fine on a tractor. I wouldn't know what to do. But yeah, we'll talk about those next week. Some of the stuff, we did a lot of stuff with cars, and it's a wonder we're still alive. Anyway, so I got some feedback from last week. One of the things I talked about on last week's show is that in St. Louis, I am not kidding, everybody, first question you get, you think I'm exaggerating, and I'm not. If you're from St. Louis, this is true. Everybody in St. Louis, when you meet them, if they're from St. Louis, you got to ask them where they went to high school. That is the most important question, bar none. Like, where'd you go to high school? Did you go to Hazelwood East? Did you go to Hazelwood Central? Did you go to McClure North? Did you go to Parkway South? It was very important, because that kind of laid out, like, it told you a lot about them without even knowing hardly anything, because you knew like their geographic area of the city. You knew whether it was a private or a public school. There was always, in St. Louis, we kind of judge our high schools on the athletic programs. Sad to say, but that is kind of how it goes. Now, Craig Burnett, one of our great listeners down in Louisville, I got to give his feedback, because he says this happens in Louisville, and I think he might have solved the issue for me. One, I think he's put a big piece of the puzzle for me is why this happens in St. Louis. He says, the whole what you did in what high school did you go to is just as big of a deal here in Louisville. People that move here from elsewhere don't understand it. I'm glad to hear that we aren't the only ones. I'm not sure anyone in Louisville would be impressed if you were Ivy League if you went to the wrong high school. For us, I think it stems from having a large Catholic presence. We have 2 large Catholic boys' high schools, and their rivalry is huge. So for many of the Catholic boys or men, there are 2 types of people. Either the Saint X, that's Saint Xavier, or Trinity. For years, they basically took turns winning state championships in football. We have some large Catholic girls' schools too, but I don't hear it quite as often among the women. I went to a public high school, and we were known for basketball and maybe being troublemakers. Personally, I liked high school okay, but probably thought my problems were a bigger deal than they were. Looking at it back, life was pretty good then. Craig, I think you hit on it for me. In St. Louis, we have a lot of Catholic high schools, and especially in North County, where I grew up. North St. Louis County is what we call it North County. And in North County, there are a ton of public high. The archdiocese has closed some of them, but when I was in high school, there were a lot of Catholic high schools, and that was definitely a rivalry. And it also, it brought out like the community, right? It was your parish. And a lot of those kids, because I know like Paige grew up playing CYC sports, which is the Catholic Youth Council. So she played Catholic high school or whatever. She played for the Catholic Church. because they had the best soccer teams. And so I know how that was because those kids played together, like, from kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade and into high school. So yeah, I bet you the rivalry and where you went to high school stems from the Catholic and those parochial schools. That is a good point. But I'm telling you what, the public schools, we had it too. Because I went to Hazelwood Central. My wife went to Hazelwood East. I didn't know my wife in high school. Let me admit that. But God, I couldn't stand Hazelwood East. They were our rival. Just the colors. They were maroon and gold. We were black and gold. Maroon and gold just made me want to gag. Oh, and they were the Spartans. Oh, man. The Spartans. And then Scotty G, what's up? We were the Hawks. A hawk could take off a Spartan to swoop down. We could fly. They can't. They're land-based. Anyway, how high school rivalries go. They run deep. One more comment from last week's show, and this one is from Michelle, my good friend down in Boynton Beach, Florida, where I wish I was there today. It is, just for the record, I think it's 42 and a cold rain in St. Louis today as I'm recording. It is miserable. Where did spring go? Remember a couple weeks ago I was talking about that it was 75? Yeah, it's not 75 anymore. Michelle says, love the high school stories and look forward to more next week. I went to a small school from K to 12 that sounds just like the school you went to in elementary school. Yes, my elementary school did go pre-K all the way through 12th grade. But there were no sports. And my dad said, we got to move. We got to do sports. So after 6th grade, we moved and went to Hazelwood Central. She says, my graduating class was only 45 kids, and 7 of us had been there since kindergarten. There are definitely pluses and minuses to small schools. I did like that our whole class was really close. Being in a small school allowed me to be involved in almost any sport or club that I wanted to. And I always wanted to do everything. Same here. I always want to try everything. The years when not enough kids came out for a team, then anyone can join, which is how I played volleyball and softball for one season. She says she was awful. I doubt it. But I also got involved and ended up loving many other clubs and cheering. Can't wait to tell some fun high school stories when you get back to the topic. Yeah, some of them were on campus and some of them were off campus, and they were fun. But we were rule followers for the most part. Corey, Fred, Ray, and myself, we were not people that were going to go out and, get arrested. We were pretty much, we were all 4 of us in class in high school were like teachers' pets. Like the teachers liked us. We were kind of like Eddie Haskell. If you watched the old Leave It to Beaver, we knew how to befriend the teachers. So the teachers were like us. Our life was easier. But we still found trouble. Don't get me wrong. We were high school boys. So we'll talk about those next week. But this week, before I jump into today's topic, I just want to give a little, I'm going to start the show off from now on with kind of what's going on in my life. Not that it's super exciting, but I always find it interesting. If I have a podcast or, what are they doing personally outside of, talking about tech or talking about running or, whatever their topic is for their show. I like to get to know them. Like, what do they do? What's going on in their life? So in my life this week, I said the weather's miserable right now. So this morning I did my run on the treadmill. Not real exciting, but I've been able to get outside for a few mornings, and that's been nice to be able to mix it up. Let's see. Paige is down in Fort Worth, Texas, as we speak, with the Missouri women's basketball team. Of course, she's a grad assistant for Missouri women's basketball. They unfortunately had a kind of a rough season. They went through a COVID stretch where a lot of the girls couldn't practice because of contact tracing and so forth. So they were close. The women's basketball team was really close in almost every game, and they're in a really hard conference. The SEC for women's basketball is insanely hard. All the best teams are in their conference, basically, except for like UConn. So they did not make the women's NCAA basketball tournament. They got into what's called the women's NIT, which is kind of a second tier tournament. So they're down in Fort Worth, Texas for the first round. They play Friday and Saturday, and we'll see how they do from there. So she's down there. This is her last stint with Mizzou women's basketball. She will finish her program after this semester. So I'm hoping for a deep run from the Tiger women for Paige's sake, so she can get a little bit more of an experience on that bench because she's really, really enjoyed it. Mallory, of course, she's my 13-year-old daughter. She's cheerleading, and we're getting ready her team is now qualified for the Summit Cheerleading Championships, which are held at ESPN Wide World of Sports starting on April 30th. So we get to go down to Walt Disney World. I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast proper. We're staying at the Hilton Disney Springs. Now, you all know that I talked about on the podcast 2 years ago because it was canceled last year because of COVID. 2 years ago, we stayed at the B Hotel in Disney Springs. Not wonderful. Not wonderful. And this time we're staying at the Hilton, Disney Springs, right across. And this one's a little bit closer to Disney Springs than the B was. It's a little bit down the road, closer to the Springs. The reason we stay there, and of course, I advocate because we could stay at Coronado for like a steal of a price on the cheerleading package. I can't believe we're not doing this. Here's why they picked the Hilton. Because they put a spring floor in their conference rooms so the girls can practice and do their what are called full outs. They're basically kind of like a run through before their program, and cheerleaders perform not on like mats, but they're called spring floors. It's kind of like the gymnastics in the Olympics. It's got a little give to it, and so they put those in the conference room so that all the cheerleading teams can have a real surface that's just like the competition to get ready. So because of that dang spring floor, Mike's staying at the Hilton Disney Springs instead of Coronado Springs. But so Pam has to come back on Monday because she has to go back to teach. We're going down on a Thursday night. She's going to come back on Monday afternoon to teach Tuesday. But Mallory and I are going to stay at Coronado Springs a couple extra nights and go to the park. So we're going to come back on Wednesday. So I'm excited for that. I'll be sharing, as plans come together with that on the podcast. I'm excited about that. Plus, we've planned our trip for this summer. We're going to go down and I won a competition actually. So I won a 4-night stay at a moderate resort. So I picked Caribbean Beach. So I get to stay at Caribbean Beach for 4 nights. I'm very excited for that. And we're going to stay 3 nights at Yacht Club on a nice discount that I got. So that's our summer plan for this year. A few nights at Yacht Club. And then we're going to go over to Caribbean Beach for a few nights. My wife hasn't been to Walt Disney World since Galaxy's Edge has opened, or the Skyliner. It's amazing because she used to go more often, obviously, in normal times. And she's excited to see those things. And I feel like at this point, like the Skyliner's been there forever. Like Galaxy's Edge has been there forever. And she hasn't gotten the opportunity to see those things. So I'm really excited for her this summer. And honestly, I'm just excited to go down and like we're staying at Yacht Club because I just want pool time. I just want to like sit by the pool, get in the lazy river. The parks are, fun. Don't get me wrong. The parks are fun, but I think I'm looking just as much forward to kind of outside the park time and snacking and just walking around and having, Disney Springs, stuff like that. So looking forward to the summer and, first real vacation because we didn't take a family vacation last summer because of COVID. All right, let's hop into today's topic. Today's topic is kind of an interesting one because I was thinking about this the other day on the treadmill. And again, this gets back to me growing up in the Midwest. And I've done a show about Saturday mornings, how we would get up in the morning. And I think this was pretty universal for most kids growing up in the 80s, especially the early 80s. We got up on Saturday mornings and what did you do? You watched the cartoons. You had your cereal that was sold to you during the cartoons, whether it was Lucky Charms, Cookie Crisp, Cocoa Puffs. I still eat those. You would do that. You'd watch your Smurfs or your Bugs Bunny, or I love Pac-Man cartoon. I love the Get Along Gang. That was not on very long, but there are a lot of cartoons you kind of watched as a kid. Now, today, what I want to talk about, and I wonder how similar or different this is for you, is that when I was a kid, everything was kind of structured on a Saturday morning for the most part. You would do that. You would get up usually ahead of your parents. And, make a bowl of cereal, sit down, plop yourself in front of the TV, watch cartoons, maybe play like a little Atari 2600 if you were lucky enough to have an Atari or something like that. But then what would happen is the cartoons would start to end in St. Louis, usually around about 11 o'clock, a little bit before lunchtime. It kind of transition into sports a lot of times, different kind of programming. Again, I was kind of a sensitive kid. Like I get a little sad every Saturday when my cartoons went off, except there was a show that I loved as a kid, This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen. Oh, do. And then that ending song, when that ending song would come on, I'd almost cry. Oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite songs of all time. The song they would play for the credits for This Week in Baseball. Love it. Anyway, so what would happen is like the cartoons would end. And then it would be kind of more to the regular TV. The adults would get the TV. And then it was like, okay, well, it's Saturday afternoon at this point. What are we going to do today? And so a lot of times, we didn't do a lot of fancy stuff, but a lot of times we just go out, go over to my friend's house. If he didn't come over during cartoons, I'd ride over to Ryan's and be like, let's go ride bikes. And so we'd ride bikes around Florissant up to the elementary school, Duchesne. Maybe my grandma lived around the block, maybe go see grandma. And a lot of times we just ride our bikes just to ride our bikes. We didn't know where to go. We just rode bikes. That was all we did. I mean, we didn't have a destination. We just go kind of explore the neighborhood. We go over 3 blocks and down 2 and, just see what we could find. And so we did that a lot. But I want to talk about some of the things like structured things that we would get to do when we were very, very lucky. Now, I've mentioned this on the show many times, is that our next door neighbor, the Bealstons, they owned a roller skating rink. And the wife, Wanda, was our babysitter. So the thing was, obviously, we got to skate anytime we wanted at the skating rink for free, that my sister and I. And so we spent a lot of time at the roller skating rink. So many times, Saturday afternoon turned into, just go up to spinning wheels and skate, because every Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoons, they had a matinee session from 2 to 4. So you could go up there, skate. And the thing was, when you went up to skate, and I'm talking as a little kid, I'm talking like when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, you would go up there, and this was the time where you didn't have to worry about the Friday night crowd, which was, the teenagers, where people were flying around. There was just a rougher crowd on a Friday night, and I was there on Friday nights my whole life, even when I was that age, but it was a lot more chill on a Saturday afternoon. The music wasn't as heavy, it was more adults and kids. It was very laid back on a Saturday and a Sunday afternoon. So I enjoyed that. And, a lot of times you wouldn't do all skating. You would, of course, go get a bag of popcorn, maybe get a pretzel, get a soda, play video games. I remember we had a haunted house pinball machine. It's spinning wheels when I was a kid. I used to love playing that. We had bubble hockey, the hockey with like the Russian team against the United States team in the big plexiglass dome. We played that a lot. Of course, we had Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Defender. Forget Defender. That game was so hard, but everybody liked to play it. So we would do those kind of things, and that was a good Saturday afternoon. So that's the thing I did the most as a kid, was go skating, because obviously it was free, and I had my own skates. And so, actually, when I was a little kid, I had some skates that were Nike skates. They were black boots with the white swoosh. Nike did make roller skates back in the day, and I thought those were just awesome. They're really cheap skates looking back, but they were Nike skates, and I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, so other things we did, I'm talking, this is like elementary school age. Another thing that we would get to do, and I remember this was always special, was my dad would take me bowling on some Saturday afternoons. Now, my dad, of course, if you think about it, bowling was kind of a big sport in the 80s, and it was really big where we lived in Florissant, Missouri. The reason bowling was so big in our town is that Dick Weber, I don't know if this is a St. Louis thing or not, but there was a professional bowler named Dick Weber, and he also had a son who is still bowling to this day, Pete Weber, who Dick Weber was from Florissant, where I grew up. He was 5 minutes from my house is where he grew up. Right where I taught elementary school, across the street was where he lived. And he was, a famous PBA bowler. And so he had Dick Weber Lane. So he had a bowling alley we would go to sometimes. And there were a lot of bowling alleys in my town. I don't know about your town. We had a lot of bowling alleys. In one of the bowling alleys we would bowl at, not Dick Weber lanes. I bowled in a league there as a kid in elementary school. I also bowled at a league in another bowling alley called Crest Bowl. But there was another bowling alley which had the cheap Saturday, like you could bowl for, I guess it was like $1 a game. It was cheap. I don't know what it would have been back then. I wasn't paying. I was in elementary school. But it was this weird bowling alley. And I still remember to this day. And if you're from St. Louis, you may have been there, but you've probably driven past it and didn't even know it was there. It was in a strip mall. Okay. So there was a bowling alley in a strip mall. And you're saying, what? So the way this worked, and we're trying to describe it, is that you came in off this, 4-lane road, 2 lanes each way. It was called Newhalls Ferry Road. And you would just pull in, and there was like a Papa John's. There was a Dunkin' Donuts. It was a strip mall. But the thing is, if you went around to the back, it was kind of where, if you came in on the top from the road, you just went in, looked like a storefront in a strip mall. However, it was kind of built on a hillside. So if you went around to the back of the building, it was a 2-story building. So if you went to the back of the building, you could also go in the back door, and that's where the bowling lanes were. They were on the bottom floor. And there were only about, I would guess, 6 to 12 lanes, possibly. I don't even know if there was 12. There weren't many. And so it was real strange, because you could come in from the front, but then first thing you would do is just go down some steps. and then you would get down to the bowling alley. But of course, this bowling alley was kind of shady. It was like always dark. It always smelled of smoke. It reeked of smoke. And I had asthma as a kid and allergies. And so it was kind of tough to be in there. But my dad, I still remember my dad because he was, again, he bowled in these bowling leagues and he loved bowling. He had this, his bowling ball. I still remember it to this day because I always thought it was so cool. It was kind of a bluish, it was like a light sky blue ball that was marble with white. It almost looked like a blue sky with white clouds, but like abstract white clouds on it. And he would bowl and I would bowl. And it was just, it was so fun to be there, like with my dad and bowling and just kind of just passing the time on a Saturday afternoon because what did you have to do? One of the things, and it's weird when you look back as a kid, the things you remember, because one of the things I remember that's stuck in my brain is that a couple of times we were there, they had a TV kind of in the bar area and they had Wide World of Sports playing because I guess that came on Saturday afternoons. I'll have to look back. But, it's always about they'd always show like skiing, like alpine ski or like ski jumping or, highlight, like sports you didn't see on TV ever back then. Because again, you didn't really have ESPN. You obviously didn't have like 12 ESPN channels. This was the only time you were exposed to athletic events outside of the United States, other than like basketball, baseball, football, hockey, soccer. It was kind of interesting to like car racing, like Indy cars. They would have, sports that were not prevalent in our country, but I remember watching it. I remember especially ski jumping. I was like, those people are crazy. And I remember watching that one time as we were bowling because it was on in the bar. But it was just and again, this could just be me, but there was like a majestic feel to Wide World of Sports, like the introduction that has that music, dun, 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 and the agony of defeat. And you see the guy flying off the side of the ski jump. Again, that's like emblazed in my mind. Like, how did that guy live? He should be in 12 pieces. That kind of stuff. But I remember bowling with my dad. And the thing was, we went to the cheapest bowling alley. But it didn't matter. Like we didn't go to Dick Weber, which was the nicest bowling alley. We didn't go to Crest. That was kind of the middle of the road bowling alley. We went to a little cheap one in the strip mall, but it was still fun. And it was, shady. It was dark. It was dank. But it was fun. We had a good time. I just loved it. Like, hey, let's go bowling. I was like, yeah, let's do that. So remember, parents, it doesn't have to be expensive stuff. Just do stuff with your kids. Okay. So another thing that I used to do on a Saturday afternoon when I had some time, when I was a kid, my parents would actually drop me off at the Florissant Civic Center, which was our community center. We had two. We still do in Florissant, where I used to live. We had the main one, and then we had one called JFK Center. And this is your typical community center, right? It's got a basketball court. It had an indoor swimming pool. It had, for the adults, like a workout room, fitness center, obviously weights, stuff like that. But what it really had that was fun for somebody that was elementary age was in the basement. It had like a rec room. Okay. So the rec room it also had an ice skating rink too. In the wintertime, you'd go ice skating, but the rec room was where it was at. So the rec room downstairs at the Civic Center, and this was for this is what your tax money paid for. You could go there for free. It had like pool tables. It had bumper pool. It had ping pong tables. It had video games, but you had to play. They only had like 2 or 3 video games. You had to pay obviously quarters for those. But it had like a shuffleboard on the floor. It had all these games that you could play. It actually had the shuffleboard that I don't know if you've ever played this, but it's like they have in bars. It's a real long wooden table. You put the salt or something, you spread it on the table. So these little metal discs slide. So we played that, but it was always exciting to go up there because again, not expensive. It was free. And they had a little snack bar that was adjacent to the ice skating rink. So you could buy, a soda or some chips or a hot dog, what have you. But I would spend time up there for hours because what I would do, I do a combo. When I was in elementary school, I played a lot of basketball. And so I would go into the gym, and what you would do is you give your resident card to the person working the desk. They would keep your card and you could get a basketball. And so then when you brought the basketball back, they gave you the resident card back. So it's kind of like giving them a shoe or something as collateral. So you would go into the gym, you had a basketball, I could shoot a basketball when I was in elementary school for 5 hours. It didn't matter. I'd shoot 3-pointers. I'd do layups. I'd do free throws. It didn't matter. If somebody was in there, we'd play horse. We'd play, 2-on-2, 3-on-3. And so that was a good way to spend a Saturday as an elementary kid. It was at the Civic Center because it was cheap. There were, you could play pool, you could play ping pong, you could play shuffleboard, you could, play basketball and get some physical activity, but it was always fun. And I enjoyed that a lot as a kid. So you got skating, you got bowling, and you got the community center kind of thing. And, there were a lot of other things. Of course, as I got older, you might go to the mall that day with friends and kind of spend the day, not even shopping, just kind of, hanging out and just walking around, and snacking. Maybe you had A&W because we had an A&W at our mall. Yeah, it was more about just being there. And, in the case of the Civic Center, I always went to the Civic Center by myself. And it was kind of a cool thing because I felt very independent. Now, a lot of times I met friends there. Ryan would be there sometimes, his parents would take him. And the thing was, you always found somebody you knew at the Civic Center because it was our Florissant Civic Center. And a lot of kids went up there on Saturdays. That's what we did. But you would go up there, your parents would drop you off maybe at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, be like, okay, we'll pick you up at 5. And so you had that 4 hours as a kid that you were on your own. You could make your own. I could have played basketball for the whole 4 hours. I could have stayed in the rec room the whole time. And that was kind of a cool thing. Now, of course, in today's society, would I drop Mallory off at probably 8 years old? Heck no. No way. I would not have done that. But back then we didn't, like sometimes as I got old, like 9 or 10, I just ride my bike over. And I had a little bike lock on my Huffy bike, and I would lock it to the bike lock or to the bike stand there and go in and just have at it. It was awesome. But, I wonder what structured things you got to do in your town when you were, say, pre-junior high. Because in junior high, that's when it started to become going to the mall, hanging out at somebody's house. And of course, I played a ton of sports. This was on days where I didn't have sporting events because I did have a lot of sporting events in elementary school. These were the days where I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't have a game. I don't have practice. The same thing with Mallory right now, right? Because she has so much cheer. They cheer 4 days a week. Competitions on the weekends, a lot like this weekend, they have a competition. Luckily, it's in St. Louis this weekend, so we're very lucky. But when she has a weekend with nothing, it's like, what are we going to do? So we'll go to the pumpkin patch, if it's that time of year. We'll go pick apples or, what have you. So it's kind of interesting. But what I would like to hear here in the comments to share for next week, when you were this age, when you were, say, pre-junior high, what did a Saturday afternoon structured activity look like? Where did you go? I mean, did you go to the arcade? Did you do something else because maybe you're in a more rural area where you didn't have a skating rink? I bet you everybody kind of had a community center, but maybe instead of going to the community center, maybe you just went to the outdoor basketball courts at the elementary school and everybody met there. What did you do? I'd like to share that. Hopefully, maybe I brought back some memories for you today. That's kind of the goal of this whole thing. But I would like to share those next week. So please drop out the Patreon, leave some comments. I'd sure appreciate it if you take the time to do that. But once again, I thank you so much for allowing us. I say this on the main feed, and I absolutely, truly, truly mean this. Because of your support, we're not going to miss a show, God willing. I always want to put that out there and give you a quality show on the main feed. And you guys are carrying the load for everybody. I get that. But, I can't thank you enough for that. We get to put out the 4 shows, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday. I hope they're always fun for you. And Sunday nights, I want you to be a part of that. Give us a call on Sunday night. Talk to Scott and I. If you have a comment about something happening in Disney, let's talk about it. That's what that show's there for. It's an open line. That's why I changed the name. It is definitely an open line for all of us to get together and talk Disney. All right, well, I'm going to duck out of here and figure out who keeps texting me. Hopefully nothing's going wrong at school for Mallory or something. I don't know. But I sure appreciate you spending some time with me here on the feed. Thank you so much for being a patron. I truly appreciate that. You're really helping us keep everything going. All right, so you guys stay safe. Of course, stay healthy. And we'll see you real soon. Thanks, everybody. Yeah. Okay. So bowling was popular in Olympia, Washington in the early 70s. Yeah. See, it was hugely popular here in Florissant. Like we watched the PBA on TV when it was like on ABC. It was crazy. It was crazy popular. But I guess maybe it was everywhere. You see it a lot on that kind of generation of TV shows. Thanks, Corwano Amber. I'll see you later. Bye.